With the Switch 2 and its game keycards representing a significant erosion of consumer ability to protect their own investments in the platform compared to its predecessor, there's a healthy, if still insufficient degree of preservation talk in the discourse surrounding the console in particular, and gaming as a whole in recent weeks. Thus, I figured it would be a good opportunity to take a deep dive on the current state of ownership in gaming, and maybe reframe some of the physical absolutism that comes from the right place but disregards a lot of other viable options. This is Little Akiba Games. I'm Patrick. Welcome back to the shop. On its face, the introduction of game keycards to the Switch 2's physical media practice is a symptom of a much broader problem, an apparent obsession by game publishers and platform holders to wrest control of the media we buy away from us in the long term, better facilitating their ability to sell it to us in another form at a later date. For those of us who get deeply invested in certain ecosystems, that trust has already completely dissolved, whether it was done by the Wii Shop channel, the Xbox 360 marketplace, the PSP, or something else that has come and gone over the years. Sure, it remains accessible on the devices we've downloaded it to, but if something ever happens to those devices, and the servers are no longer there to retrieve our purchased content from, we're kinda screwed. Now, to Nintendo's credit, game keycards do circumvent a lot of the problems often associated with digital storefronts, device locking and account locking chief among them. When you insert a game keycard into a Switch 2, it will retrieve the game from Nintendo's servers and install it to the system, no questions asked. From there, it will load up on your system at any point so long as the card is present, even after the servers are shut down. There's no check-in, and that's nice. Putting aside the innate classism in requiring an online connection to initially access the content, which is a lot less substantial with a hybrid mobile device like the Switch 2 than with a full-scale console like the PlayStation 5 or the Xbox Series X, the real problems emerge when the servers go down. As we know by now, Nintendo will cut an online service at their earliest convenience, even when the service is tied to monumentally successful platforms like the Wii or the DS, which it should be noted are comparable in their sales figures to the Switch. Operating on that understanding, we should assume that Nintendo will also end the Switch 2's online service, whatever form it should take, at the first opportunity. I would calculate this to be around 2035 or 2036 based on their existing track record. At which point, without considerable safeguards, every game keycard ever sold becomes tantamount to e-waste, at least for aftermarket purposes. Existing users of these keycards might have to wait for hardware failure or some other move to another Switch 2 for these issues to come to bear, but the comments section of the last video felt like I was inadvertently handed a puzzle, challenging me to somehow find ways where the practice of game keycards can be anything short of a catastrophe. I've sat on it for a while, and there are definitely some interesting possibilities should Nintendo ever bother to pursue them. The easiest answer, of course, would be an explicit commitment to forward compatibility, for Nintendo to march out Yoshiaki Koizumi, a well-liked executive who happens to be one of the few to avoid any real semblance of association with recent PR disasters, and express a company-wide commitment to maintaining NSO in its current form in perpetuity. To say that everything they do moving forward will be an extension of this ecosystem and therefore, the game library servers will always be available. It would be a significant comfort to anyone justifiably skeptical about the long-term viability of game keycards as a product. Even more so if it is accompanied with a statement like, "It is still many years too early to speak with any real detail on our next platform, but rest assured that it begins with an ongoing commitment to Switch physical media as we know it right now. The Switch game cards, as well as the Switch 2 game cards and game keycards that you buy now, will work not only on their respective platforms, but also on future generations of Nintendo hardware." If there's a way for this statement to be legally binding, so much the better. Looking away from that level of idealism, the easiest thing Nintendo could do is treat game keycards as exactly what they're intended to be: a proof of license to boot digital copies of games without the account system being involved. This could actually be amazing if all other checks are removed, but rather than pessimism on that point, I'm honestly just not sure how far ahead Nintendo has even thought about this. But let's look at some possibilities. In one scenario, let's say you've downloaded a game from Nintendo's servers via a game keycard. You're enjoying it, you're revisiting it every few years, and still actively go back to it even after Nintendo closes support for the system. Then one day, your Switch 2 dies. You replace the hardware, slap the SD card into your replacement system, and fire it up. If the game works without an online check-in, great, W Nintendo. In another scenario, the system stays solid after the servers go down, but the SD card gets corrupted. If you can go to your PC, grab a backup that you made in advance upon originally downloading the game, load it up on a new card, and boot it on the same system, then again, W Nintendo. Now let's take it a little further, and this is the one that's probably going to make some corporate types really uncomfortable. The year is 2040. The servers have been down for 4 or 5 years, but you find a copy of Bravely Default at your local shop that you want to play because you didn't get around to it before. You buy the game keycard, get it home, and then reach out to a friend who has the game to see if they can make a copy of it for you to load onto your SD card, or maybe you look online for a third-party archive for the right game data to use. In any case, you get the game onto your Switch 2, verify it with the game keycard that you bought used, and enjoy playing the copy that you bought years after Nintendo stopped distributing it themselves. This is, by my estimation, the best case scenario outside of perpetual online support, and something worth demanding from Nintendo as a standard if we're going to accept game keycards as consumers. It's a high standard, yes, but by no means is it an unreasonable one. For game keycards to have real legitimacy as physical ownership, any element of online verification must be completely and utterly divorced from the process. The game keycard must solitarily be treated as absolute proof of ownership so that it can serve its intended function fully independent of Nintendo's continued approval. If the game keycard actually works as a key, if the combination of a game keycard with game data invariably results in a boot regardless of where the latter is sourced from, then the value proposition is at least noteworthy. Is it at all likely to happen? Probably not, but it's at least worth putting it into the discussion for the sake of intellectual honesty. There are measures that would be at least satisfactory overall, if not ideal. Everyone's investment gets some protection, and Nintendo isn't locked into eternal network support. Neither side might be comfortable, but they should at least be mostly satisfied. I feel that engaging troubling situations like game keycards with as much good faith as possible is necessary, and this at least gives Nintendo a reasonable, achievable, measurable benchmark for meeting consumers where the practical needs actually lie. I would genuinely be willing to meet Nintendo there, or somewhere fundamentally like it. Now let's zoom out a bit and go into why this is a Patrick Sounds Off video and not a Patrick on Nintendo. Admittedly, my hawkishness on physical media often puts me in the company of those who tend to romanticize the experience of buying, holding, and owning an actual physical product. And while I obviously have to admit to at least a little bit of that myself, my particular issue lies much deeper: the need to have total control of my investment. When done correctly, control is what ultimately lies at the heart of physical media, so long as you avoid stuff like what game keycards at least appear to be at this point in time, where the game itself, or at least access to the game, relies on servers that could be taken down on a whim. However, I've had some people over the years mistakenly try hitting me with the hypocrite argument because I do have an extensive Steam library, putting aside the fact that most of it was accrued for pennies on the dollar, and am openly a huge supporter of GOG, like that's some kind of gotcha. So how can I be so inflexible on physical media when it comes to the console manufacturers when I support what I support on the PC side? Well, it comes down to two things: good faith and control. Steam launched in 2003 to the general public and spent the first part of its life primarily existing just to boot Half-Life 2. It took time for its current form as a general centralized marketplace and launcher for PC games to take shape, but once it did, continuity has been absolute. Games that you bought on Steam 15 or 20 years ago are still locked to your account and can still be downloaded today, even if they have long since been delisted, like Outrun 2006 Coast to Coast. Since Steam launched, the Wii Shop channel, DSiWare, the PSP Store, the Wii U eShop, and the 3DS eShop have all come and gone, just naming those I can think of right away, due to a singular critical flaw: being joined at the hip to their respective hardware. The Xbox 360 marketplace hangs on by a thread due to the ability to continue downloading your games to the system with the aid of a mobile app. It's not ideal, but it's something, and I can't rightly call the service extinct so long as that's there. Moreover, Valve shows they care about that continued access to the content you own by actively working to maintain compatibility as PC technology evolves, and they even facilitate a broader community that works to the same end, filling the gaps that Valve doesn't have the manpower to address. There's a reason why Steam has endured for so long as a marketplace and has only seen increased consumer trust over the years. Valve has gone to great lengths to attain that degree of confidence. CD Projekt's GOG, or Good Old Games, is similarly trusted, though it hasn't been around as long. It is especially noteworthy for its commitment to preservation by having an increased focus on older titles, actively working on the compatibility thereof, and critically, disabling DRM outright as a hard and fast rule across the entire platform, offering up a permanent and absolute answer to the control of investment issue. When you buy a game on GOG, you're free to keep it personally archived for future installation on whatever computer you may purchase in the future, even if you lose access to the service for whatever reason. They also earned some well-deserved good press recently for their Dreamlist initiative, which allows GOG users to directly advocate for games to be added to the service, even if they are not PC releases. This initiative led to the GOG launch of Breath of Fire 4 a couple weeks ago, opening broad availability to an old PlayStation rarity and lending instant credibility to the Dreamlist concept. Obviously, being a firm believer in exactly this, I went there immediately and upvoted as many JRPGs and arcade racers as I could think of, along with whatever grails came to mind across all platforms. We could seriously weaponize this against the most exploitative corners of the resale market if we put our minds to it, but that's another conversation for another time. The point I'm trying to make here is that without tying their services to a platform that is designed from the start to be replaced, Valve and CD Projekt have inspired a consumer confidence that continues to elude that of their console counterparts. They've never really screwed us over where similar console services have already done so several times. Therefore, console marketplaces are going to be inherently untrustworthy until something meaningful changes. In all fairness, we may be seeing the beginnings of it already. For example, the Xbox Series being less of a successor to the Xbox One than an extension of it necessitates full continuity of the online back end. And with Microsoft increasingly positioning Game Pass as the platform rather than the Xbox, they may unwittingly but fortunately be handcuffing themselves to this version of the marketplace for decades to come. It would actually be more of a bother for them to cut off the Xbox system's access, even if they do end up shuttering their hardware business outright at some point in the future. Nintendo finds themselves in a similar position. Now, it's too early to tell whether the Switch 2 version of the shop and the Legacy version are actually one and the same, but if it is, that should actually be taken as a relief to anyone worried about the Legacy Switch losing access to the network in a few years, as the Wii U and 3DS did before it. Through this lens, the physical media issue is merely one facet of what really matters here: control. If there is no risk of losing access to the digital content we purchase in the long term, whether because of hardware failure, loss of network access, discontinuation of online service, media failure, or some other factor, then and only then can we buy in confidence. We know this because there are services out there already doing it right. However, console manufacturers have a unique hurdle to clear, because all too often they tailor the service to their current platform with no eye on the future. Once they start designing the platform to access an online service that is larger than itself by nature, and therefore will always remain accessible to that platform just by existing, then we will start to develop that level of trust needed to make these services viable. In the absence of that trust, and without a strong physical option, a lot of consumers will understandably default to the next most viable path that gives them the requisite degree of control for the asking price.
And the reason that we think that we don't have issues with piracy is that there's misconceptions in the industry about what piracy is, right? You know, there's assumption that what is piracy? Piracy is about people who want to steal stuff from you, right? That they don't want to pay any money and they want to get your content. But when you look at the fact that these people have, $2,000 PCs and they're spending $50 a month US more on their internet connections, clearly they're willing to spend money. So from our point of view, what we saw more and more is that piracy is a result of bad service on the part of game companies.
That's all for now. If you like this video, then please be sure to like, comment, share, and especially subscribe. Click the notification bell with the all option to make sure you're informed when the next video goes up. And do this for all of your favorite channels so that the algorithm isn't just left to guess. Build the YouTube that you want to use. I hope to see you back here next time at Little Akiba Games.